Lead-in. Recording 1. 1.
I went to India in between school and university.
2.
I don't know this shop.
3.
Would you like to eat mine?
4.
My email address is on our website.
5.
Could you remind me about the party?
Unit 1. Game Changer. Recording 1. 1.
Her election as Prime Minister had a profound impact on girls' expectations.
2.
This person is a pioneer in the field of social networking websites.
3.
In this period, the conventional wisdom was that the world was flat.
4.
This Stone Age invention was game-changing for travel.
5.
His election brought about a paradigm shift regarding political campaigns.
6.
Its destruction in 1989 set in motion a series of events that transformed the world.
7.
The discovery represented a major breakthrough in eliminating polio.
8.
Scientists are conducting pilot studies to see if this could replace fossil fuels.
Unit 1. Recording 2.
Adjective-noun collocations.
Major breakthrough. Profound impact. Conventional wisdom.
Noun-noun collocations.
Game-changing. Paradigm shift. Pilot studies.
Unit 1. Recording 3.
Unstinting. Compassionate. Philanthropic. On welfare. Destitute. Altruistic. Hard up. Vulnerable.
Unit 1. Recording 4.
Now, wouldn't it be fantastic, don't you think, if we could help someone or change someone's life for the better every single week, not just occasionally, but every single week? Well, Jamie Thurston tries to do that through her website, 52 Lives, where a story is posted every week detailing the specific things that somebody needs. For example, a gift card, a pram, a vacuum cleaner, or some toys. And Jamie, I suppose that's the key. It's very simple, isn't it? It's putting the power in people's hands and saying, have you got this?
It is. It's about spreading kindness, really, and as you said, trying to change one life every week. And we do that with the help of almost 100,000 people now who follow the website and follow our social media pages and offer help to people they've never even met and who'll never thank them. It's complete, pure kindness.
How many people have been helped?
This week is week 122.
Oh.
A few weeks ago, we helped a little girl in Hull called Josie. She's got a very serious genetic condition. She's in bed a lot of the time, and her family spend a lot of time in the bedroom with her. It's kind of become their living room, I guess. And it was in a really poor state, and they didn't have the money to fix up her room. So we had painters and decorators, artists, people buying furniture, and we've completely redone her room for her. But what I've learned over the weeks, I guess, of 52 Lives is that even though we give people tangible things and things that they need, that hasn't been what's changing their life. It's the kindness that people are showing that's what's changing their life. Because if you're going through quite a hard time and complete strangers, offer you something or are kind to you, that can really change your life.
And, how did this all start?
It started off as a Facebook page for my friends and family. I got the idea when I was shopping online for some second-hand furniture and I saw a wanted ad. And it was a lady saying that she needed a rug. She was hoping someone would donate a rug to her. She said her floor was all broken, there were nails coming through, her children were cutting their feet. And I didn't have a rug, but I contacted her and said, if you find someone to donate it, I could pick one up for you, because I knew she didn't have a car. And we got chatting, and I learnt more about her situation. And her and her children had escaped quite a horrible domestic violence situation. They'd lived in a garden shed for a little while. It was a horrible state. And as I learnt more about her, I just thought, between my network of friends and family, I thought if people knew about her, they would help her. And so I started a Facebook page. We did help her, and then I thought, between my friends and family, we could do this every week. We could do something to help people. And then it grew and grew, and we've got almost 100,000 supporters now.
What are the latest things that people have been asking for? And in fact, what is the most unusual thing that anyone's ever asked for? Because people's needs can be very simple but so different.
One of the more unusual things we've given somebody was teeth. There was a man called Victor in America. He was from Alabama, and he'd had heart surgery, and he had to have all his teeth removed before his heart transplant. I think it was to minimise the risk of infection or something. And he didn't have any money to replace his teeth, so he was just going to have no teeth for the rest of his life. And so we set up a fundraising page for him, and we raised money and bought him some new teeth.
What do you think this idea, this website, will be doing in 5 years from now? Have you got plans to expand it?
Well, we've just launched a school kindness project.
Unit 1, Recording 5.
And the next section was particularly interesting. On the whole, people expressed a curiosity about businesses that had less relevance for them. So they wanted to know more about services that they were in fact unlikely to use, which was surprising for us. To cite one example, people who don't have pets tended to be particularly interested in getting information about the pet-related services. Our impression was simply that these businesses had some novelty for them, and their interest presumably reflected amusement more than a genuine desire to use the service. One person said, "It just never occurred to me that such a business would exist."
Another illustration of this is the number of people who asked for more information about the parking services, who, as it turned out, don't actually have a car. Generally speaking, though, when we asked people about actually using the services, there was limited interest in trying out ones that the survey participants hadn't used in the past. The consensus seems to be that people are partial to what they already use or know about, and are satisfied with the service they're getting for the price they're paying. One might speculate that this reflects human nature. People don't like to go out of their comfort zone. But having said that, some people were drawn by alternatives to services they already use, such as home exchange instead of Airbnb.
Yes, and in that case, there's a real difference in the way the services work, since with Airbnb you pay for what you use, and with home exchange you only pay a membership fee, and after that the services are free. Now, moving on to the next question, we asked several people.
Unit 1, Recording 6. A.
On the whole, people expressed a curiosity about businesses that had less relevance for them.
B.
To cite one example, people who don't have pets tended to be particularly interested in getting information about the pet-related services.
C.
Our impression was simply that these businesses had some novelty for them.
D.
And their interest presumably reflected amusement more than a genuine desire to use the service.
E.
Another illustration of this is the number of people who asked for more information about the parking services, who, as it turned out, don't actually have a car.
F.
Generally speaking, though, there was limited interest in trying out services that the survey participants hadn't used in the past.
G.
The consensus seems to be that people are partial to what they already use or know about.
H.
One might speculate that this reflects human nature.
Unit 1, Recording 7.
I have a lot of friends who are musicians, and it always strikes me how much they struggle to find a space where they can rehearse and develop new material.
Yeah, and actually not have music as a sort of secondary thing in their lives. I mean, if they can't make enough money from it to live and have to get a job, they might not be able to find a place or time to practice.
That's the thing. I think it's the ideal group for a co-living space. They need a kind of space that addresses their specific needs.
Yeah, and they can understand and sort of put up with each other. The irregular daily timetables, the noise.
Don't call it noise.
Okay, the sounds, the music, the cacophony of sound.
Anyway, let's talk about facilities, practice rooms.
Definitely. Lots of soundproof rehearsal spaces.
Small ones, one or two big ones.
Maybe no small ones. You know, I think their private spaces, their bedrooms can actually double as their private rehearsal spaces, if they're soundproofed.
That sounds good. So, a few big rehearsal spaces, and then each resident has their own soundproof bedroom or private space. That would seem to me to be the key consideration. It's kind of the main need they have in their private space.
Along with the usual peace and quiet. And for sleeping, it's good because if others are rehearsing at 3 a.m. and you want to, sleep, you can.
So, what about communal spaces, besides rehearsal rooms?
Well, I wouldn't put kitchens in the individual bedrooms.
No.
I'd have one big communal kitchen, really well equipped, a big eating area.
Good idea. How about a dining area that doubles as a performance room?
So, with a stage at one end?
Yeah, a stage, and some attention should be given to acoustics.
An acoustic ceiling?
If it's in the budget. How about other recreation?
Like a cinema? That would make sense, for watching DVDs, and I'm thinking DVDs of performances.
So really amazing sound system.
Definitely.
So, let's talk about services.
Well, it's not exactly a service, but I was thinking how important it would be to connect with the local community in a positive way. I mean, people living around this residence might have an issue with the noise and the kind of people living there, so residents could provide free concerts.
A sort of open house.
Yeah, every Saturday or something.
And music lessons for local kids.
Yeah, brilliant idea. That would solve the public relations problem for sure.
And it gives the residents their regular audience.
Kills two birds with one stone.
So what other problems do we need to think about?
Knowing my musician friends, the biggest problem would actually be personality clashes that are about the music. You know, it's like, I really don't agree with your style.
It's an approaches and taste thing.
Yeah, but we're talking about professionals, sort of. Or not professionals, but people who have extremely strong feelings about their profession, about their art.
That can lead to a lot of tension.
Not sure what to do about it.
On-site mediator?
Or something like that. These kinks can be worked out in practice.
Yeah, a few hiccups are inevitable. It's hard to know what to do before you're in the situation. I mean, sometimes...
Unit 2. Learning. Recording 1. 1.
How often do you point out other people's mistakes?
Seldom, if ever.
2.
How many spelling mistakes are there in your emails?
Few, if any.
3.
You aren't going to complain about this soup, are you?
I certainly am, whether you like it or not.
4.
How would you feel if you didn't get the top grade?
I'd feel as if I'd let everyone down.
5.
You think you've made a mistake in a dish you're preparing, but you're not sure.
If in doubt, I'd throw it away and start again.
6.
There's a small stain on one of your t-shirts. Would it bother you?
No, as long as no one could see it.
Unit 2. Recording 2.
3 syllables.
Nurturing. Excellence. Fostering. Fulfilling. Potential. Quality. Rigorous. Mutual.
4 syllables.
Environment. Relationships. Curriculum. Initiative.
More than 4 syllables.
Individuality.
Unit 2, Recording 3. 1.
It was a very nurturing environment.
2.
We will strive for excellence.
3.
It's important to foster good relationships.
4.
I want to fulfill my potential.
5.
We have a quality curriculum.
6.
We need rigorous standards.
7.
I like to take the initiative.
8.
It's crucial to have mutual respect.
Unit 2, Recording 4.
Professor Mitra, welcome to The Educators.
Thank you.
Now, last year you won from the online lecture series TED a $1 million prize for a project that you wanted to do, which was to build what they've called schools in the cloud. And as a result, you are in the process of putting 7 schools in the cloud. And the way they work, you call them SOLs, which is self-organised learning environments. Explain how they work now.
The self-organized learning environment tries to simulate the chaotic environment of the hole-in-the-wall experiment, which was computers outdoors with no supervision and children accessing it. The SOL attempts to do the same inside the classroom. So you have a few computers, you have lots of children usually, and you trigger the whole system off with a big question.
Give us an example.
You could, for example, ask them, why does hair grow? A typical 9-year-old would say, what do you mean? So I'd say, the hair on your head keeps growing longer and longer and longer, and then you have to cut it off. Why on earth does it do that? It doesn't seem to do that on animals. And then the magic starts off.
So what, you leave them alone in the room with a computer and they have to work out how to answer the question?
We call these the big questions. A big question is something that a child is attracted by and to which, preferably, no one really has the right answer.
Now, one of the things you've established in these cases that you're talking about, there's no adult involvement. You did discover that actually sometimes children do need a bit of help. And this is where what you've called the granny cloud comes in, which is this idea that there's a little bit of help from the British granny, I think was your perfect model.
Well, that came out of an experiment in India, which was designed to fail. I said, I'll give the children a task that is so hard that they couldn't possibly do it. The task I chose was undergraduate level genetics in English for 12-year-old Tamil-speaking children in an Indian village. I had a test at the end of it, which they'd gotten a 0 in to start with, and they got 30%. So I didn't want to stop there. I said, but how do I get that 30 up further? Because 30 is a fail. So what I got was a friendly local girl. She was 22 years old and a great friend of the children. They used to play together. And she says, biotechnology, I don't know anything about it. I didn't even have science in school. I said, look, you're the best I have here. You don't understand the subject, doesn't matter. Can you just go on encouraging them?
So go on, what happened?
50% in 2 months.
Purely from the encouragement?
Just from the encouragement.
So somebody just saying to the children, well done, you're doing really well.
Yes.
And they carry on doing it and they get their score up.
Anyhow, the Guardian was interviewing me. I said, will you put in just a couple of lines at the bottom saying that if you are a British grandmother, if you have broadband and a web camera, can you give me 1 hour of your time for free? Because I needed 1 million of them.
Right. So you created this granny cloud
It
effectively
became the
on
granny
Skype.
cloud.
Look, let's hear how one of your classrooms, they've been called School in the Cloud, it's a classroom in the cloud, how it's gone down at Greenfield Community College in Newton Aycliffe and County Durham.
Right, we've got Max. Max is here.
My name is Lucy McCormick and I'm 13 years old and we're in room 13.
Maybe we shouldn't be quite so accepting.
Room 13 is a room where the pupils come in to ask a question from a granny who's in different parts of the country and they have to find out the answer independently.
You kind of work in groups and use the computers but talk to each other about what...
In room 13 there are no teachers because the pupils feel that the teachers give them a specific website to look on and they don't like it. In room 13 when the teachers aren't here you feel more open to what you can look at and what you can't look at because you're learning yourself and finding out what not to look at and what to look at.
My name's Thomas Kelly, I'm 15. Well, when we first heard about it we thought, I don't really want to do it because it sounds really strange compared to normal lessons. But when we got in it was really cool. Well, I know it's imbalanced between traditional ways of learning and modern because teachers like to stick with the tried and true methods and stuff. But in all honesty, they do need to move forward with the lessons because we get bored really quickly.
I never thought my education would include a room without a teacher in. It was frightening at first because I think we were all curious on what it was all about, but because we've had quite a few sessions in room 13, we know what it's all about now and we're not frightened to come in here without the teacher.
Unit 2, Recording 5.
You've even said that memorising facts or solving problems alone are terrible ways of being educated. Why are they so terrible?
Well, perhaps terrible is not quite the right word, but memorizing facts and being able to repeat them years and years later is something that we needed to do about 100 years ago because we didn't have access to facts at the point of need. So it was important that for the first 15 or 16 years of life, somebody should decide the key facts that need to get stored in our brains.
You said that we still learn these things because we have a romantic attachment to the past and that's making us hang on to skills we just don't need anymore.
Yes. And I don't know if it's romantic. I think it's just that when things become obsolete or not needed, we often don't notice that for a while.
Are you suggesting that that's what's happened to times tables? It is no longer any... You're nodding. We shouldn't be teaching our children the times tables?
Absolutely not. I can't see a single reason why we should.
What about spelling?
The same, unfortunately.
Grammar?
Also the same.
You'd stop teaching any of those things?
No. I'm misunderstood on this point very frequently. I'm saying we don't need to teach spelling. I'm not saying children don't need to learn spelling. And I'm saying that if a child grows up with a spell checker, his spelling will automatically get better. You misspell a word once, you misspell it twice, you don't misspell it the third time. I've been trying to say this all around the world, that assistive technology teaches. It doesn't make you stupid.
So what should we be teaching our children?
We should teach them how to discern the information that they need from the information that they don't. And that's a very difficult skill at this point in time. It has to become mainstream.
So it's just a question of a judgment on what is presented to them. It's the difference between knowing this is a reliable website and this one is not.
We have access to anything we want at the point of need. All we need to know is how to distinguish between the right and the wrong.
Unit 2, Recording 6.
Let's get started. First of all, shall we just introduce ourselves? I'll start. I'm Amy and I'm a parent here.
My name's Chad and I'm a trainee teacher.
Yes, hi, I'm Pete. I have one teenage son here.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm 21 and I'm a student.
Perfect. Okay, so our task today is to discuss these two questions. The first being, does traditional education leave enough room to develop children's imagination, their creativity, or does it actually stifle it, in your opinion? And the second question, should any changes be made to our curriculum, and if so, what are they? So, what I'd like to do, I think, is start with question 1, and I'm going to be making some notes as we go along, so don't let that distract you. Right, Chad.
Yeah.
What do you think about question 1?
Traditional education. My opinion about traditional education is, even though I don't have kids myself, is that it's very rigid. It's very rigid. There's a lot of testing early on, even from year 1, let alone with Pete's child here is in secondary school, but even from much further back. They're testing and assessing children's abilities right from the very beginning, and it's not only the amount of testing, but also what they're testing them in.
And what's wrong with that?
Well, I just think that children learn very differently, and
could you explore that point further? Because I think that's important. Is that
the difference
you're suggesting that some children actually may benefit, some not?
I think that I think that from a very young age, and even I have some friends who have children who are also in secondary school, and they don't test very well, and yet they are perfectly capable. They learn very well, but they don't test very well. They don't regurgitate the kind of facts that they are told to kind of just memorize and just spit it back out.
Can I just check where you're coming from?
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that there should be less testing or no testing? Or that testing should be done in a different way?
Yeah, I think in a different way. I think it's good to do some kind of assessment, but I think the rigid way that the assessments are done at the moment
Let's stay focused a
don't
minute,
help every
Chad.
child.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we're actually looking at, crucially, whether it develops the children's imagination, not necessarily how the testing is done, but whether you think, in essence, it's a good thing for their imagination.
Well, we may be going down a sort of testing rabbit hole here that isn't entirely helpful, because if the question is, does the curriculum itself encourage creativity or stifle it, surely that is to do with the emphasis and the energy that the individual school or teacher places on the subject. So if a school is focusing on STEM subjects, on science and technology, English and maths,
could you run... Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Then you could argue perhaps that the creativity is being squashed, but many schools focus very much on the arts and encouraging those subjects. So if you look at, I've made a note of what I consider to be creative subjects here: drama, dance, music, media studies, and photography. There's plenty of opportunity.
True, but
provided the organisation of the school or the leadership of the school is focusing on those and giving them enough energy.
Right, okay. Let's look at that further, but I want to bring in Sarah at this point, because you looked as though you wanted to add something. Do you want to add something there?
Well, I can see both sides of the argument, but I think it's up to the individual. For instance, I was very much more into the arts. A friend of mine was more into science and maths, and the testing that we did.
I'm not sure we're sure what argument we're actually having.
Sorry,
here.
Peter, can we just hear what Sarah's got to say?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I was just saying that it depends. I think some testing can be useful to see how far a student is progressing.
Well, that's certainly worth considering as well.
But don't you agree that as a young person entering the world of work, that being familiar with the idea of evaluation, of being appraised, is something that's going to stand you in good stead when you get into that? I was asking her. Sorry.
I think we might be digressing a little bit here. I think we need to just stay focused on whether the traditional education as it stands, does leave enough room.
Yeah, I don't think it does. And that comes down to...
But if you look at the split here between the
actual
STEM
coursework,
subject, then I don't think your argument stands up, because all of the opportunities for creative subjects are there, and they should be properly assessed and rigorously tested as the other subjects.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that, Peter, that you think things are fine as the way they are.
I do.
Is that right?
I think.
Is that in your experience, though, from when your boy was in primary school? Was he getting a wide variety of different creative subjects as well as those?
I think
the
he's
writing...
getting more now at secondary school than he did at primary school.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move on because I know that we're pressed for time. So let's stay focused, and we're going to move to question 2 now. Should any changes be made to our curriculum, and if so, what? Who would like to kick this one off?
I will. I would love to.
Thank you.
Unit 2, Recording 7.
Initiating a discussion or a topic.
So our task today is to... What I'd like to do, I think, is start with... Who would like to kick this one off?
Getting others to clarify ideas.
Could you elaborate on that? Could you run that past us again? Could you explore that point further? Can I just check where you're coming from? Correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that...
Giving feedback, evaluating.
That's an interesting perspective. I can imagine that working. That's certainly worth considering.
Unit 2, Recording 8. 1.
Did you want to add anything, Sarah?
2.
Let's stay focused.
3.
Can I just wrap up what I was saying?
4.
I think we might be digressing here.
5.
Can I make a comment about that?
6.
If I could just come in here.
7.
Can we just hear what Sarah wanted to say?
8.
We're pressed for time, so let's move on to the next question.
Unit 2, Recording 9. 1.
Did you want to add anything, Sarah?
2.
Let's stay focused.
3.
Can I just wrap up what I was saying?
4.
I think we might be digressing here.
5.
Can I make a comment about that?
6.
If I could just come in here.
7.
Can we hear what Sarah wanted to say?
8.
We're pressed for time, so let's move on to the next question.
Unit 3, Prospects. Recording 1.
And that's the key to finding the career path that's best for you. Thank you all for listening. I'm happy to take questions now. Yes, there in the second row.
My question is about actually getting a job. The job market is so competitive. How can you make yourself stand out when you apply? What are the tricks for getting your CV to the top of the pile?
Well, first of all, there are no tricks really, but your question hits the nail on the head. You do have to understand the job market from the point of view of the prospective employer. These days, there are bound to be a very large number of applicants for any given position, and so the person handling all those applications has to narrow down the choice to a small handful of people.
So how can I make sure I'm one of the small handful?
Well, of course, it's complicated, but I can give you some basic guidance. One area to look at is the buzzwords that come up time and time again in job advertisements. For example, these often refer to good organisation and communication skills. Those are two different things, but they're key. The ones you see mentioned the most. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Next question. Yes, the man over there. Can you pass the mic over to him?
I have a question about what you just said. Organisation and communication skills sound so general. Can you say more about them?
Well, let's start with organisation. Think about all the information and data we deal with in our everyday lives and how overwhelming that can be. Well, it's no different in a job, and it's absolutely essential that you have the skills to enable you to manage large amounts of information efficiently. In many jobs, you're going to have a lot thrown at you, so you need to have the capacity to select and prioritise in a way so that nothing gets lost and so that you can trace any item of information quickly.
And communication skills?
Having good social skills and being able to handle people have always been important. But what employers are looking for these days is different from 25 to 30 years ago because of changes in how we communicate. Face-to-face interpersonal skills are part of this. Being able to articulate your ideas clearly is key. You need to be good at getting people to want to listen to you, to get them to feel it's worth their while. If you've ever noticed people having trouble listening to you, it could be that you aren't concise or articulate enough.
I see, thank you.
And then there's... Sorry, just let me finish. This is the important bit. Online communication. And not everyone is a fan of social networking, but this is part of the literacy that's expected of employees nowadays. It's obviously your responsibility to choose the appropriate platform to convey the right impression of who you are. And of course, you should always demonstrate common sense and discretion in controlling the image you personally convey. We all have a massive digital footprint that comes from everything we've ever done online. And that is a commodity for a prospective employer. If there's a problem with your digital footprint, inevitably it will come out at some point. Do you see what I mean?
I didn't really understand the last thing you said. Can you explain a bit more?
Well, who you communicate yourself to be, your reputation if you will, is of a potential value for an employer. Companies talk about their reputational value, their RV, and I always tell my clients, your RV is as important as your CV.
I get it, thank you.
You're welcome. Next question? Yes, go ahead.
Another buzzword I've often seen is flexibility. Could you say something about what that means to employers?
Ah, yes. I think, simply put, that means the willingness to put your hand to anything, to muck in. You might be asked to take on a range of tasks and do this with enthusiasm rather than grudgingly. Saying, I'm not going to do this because it's outside my job description will not go down well. And it's good on your CV if you can show you've done this in the past.
So it's like being a good team player?
Exactly. That's another very common phrase in job adverts. At the same time, of course, it's also good to be able to be a self-starter and be able to take the initiative where needed. It's the flexibility to take on a range of different roles as needed. Does that help?
Yes, thanks.
Yes, the man in the red t-shirt.
Every job advert I've looked at says you're supposed to have experience and a proven track record. I'm in my final year of university and, apart from summer jobs, I haven't actually worked.
Many people think a novice can't easily point to things like experience and a track record, but there are skills that a novice to the market can focus on in a CV. The three biggies are the ability to work in a team, motivation, and creativity. It's not enough to have knowledge or tech skills or other such hard skills. Employers are looking for soft skills. It's vital that anyone entering the job market, at least in the current climate, understands what these are and applies themselves to developing in these areas. But you can't just say you're creative or a good team worker or motivated. You need to demonstrate practically how you've shown these abilities.
How do I do that? I haven't had a real job.
Well, you mentioned that you have had summer jobs, and you've been at university for, 4 years? It seems totally unimaginable that you've never had to apply your creativity, that you've never worked in a team or never shown motivation. Indeed, you may well have done all these things. Reflect on what you've done. Be honest with yourself about your weaknesses, but be proud of your strengths and your achievements too. If you're a good candidate for a job, there's a potentially strong likelihood that you'll get to the interview stage.
I see. That's been very useful and encouraging. Thank you.
You're very welcome. There's time for one more question. Yes?
Speaking of university students, to what extent is it important to have a degree?
That's a tricky one. In some countries, a university degree is no longer as important as it used to be. That's because a degree means very little after you've been working for a while. However, in some countries, it's still a real selling point. And of course, it all depends on the job. OK, everyone. I think that's it for now. Thank you for coming and...
Unit 3, Recording 2. 1.
You look exhausted. How are things at check-in?
Flight delays, angry passengers. I can't think straight.
2.
I'll go and check the problem with the email server.
You needn't bother. I've already done it.
3.
Sorry, miss. My computer crashed and I lost all my homework.
That must have been annoying.
4.
You'll be alone on the fish counter today. Anna's phoned to say she won't be coming in.
Anna again. I might have guessed.
5.
Can I ask you another question, Minister?
Sorry, I've got to go now.
6.
Hi, Susie. Sorry, I was held up in the traffic. Is it too late for you to look at Felix?
You might as well come in.
7.
It's just an oil change. OK if I pick it up at 9?
I may not be ready. Give me a call first thing.
Unit 3, Recording 3. 1.
I can't think straight.
2.
You needn't bother.
3.
That must have been annoying.
4.
I might have guessed.
5.
Sorry, I've got to go now.
6.
You might as well come in.
7.
I may not be ready.
Unit 3, Recording 4. 1.
Might be seen by...
2.
Did they deserve to be fired?
3.
We shouldn't have been fired.
4.
My account got hacked.
5.
There's nothing to be done.
6.
A mistrial was declared.
7.
I've been having work done on my back.
8.
There's a lot to be said for honesty.
9.
Not being given a second chance.
10.
Without fear of being spotted.
Unit 3, Recording 5.
Figures coming out today show that the gender pay gap, the difference between what men and women earn, has widened in the last 2 years and now stands at 20%, up 2% from 2 years ago when it stood at 18%. The government, in its election manifesto, promised to reduce the pay gap within 2 years. Now, 2 years on since the election, it seems things have got worse. So, what's happened? We're joined in the studio by Anne Simmons, Junior Minister for Employment. This figure is shocking, isn't it?
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me on the programme.
Good morning. So, as I said, this figure really is shocking, isn't it? Despite pre-election promises by your party, the gender pay gap is actually getting wider.
Well, it would be shocking, but this figure has been taken out of context. Let me put it in perspective. In fact, female employment has risen significantly in the past few years, and what we're seeing is actually a positive. in that more women are in work than ever before.
But surely that's not the point. If women's pay is getting worse in comparison to men, then something is very wrong. In your manifesto, your party promised to bridge the pay gap. So why have you broken that election pledge? Why haven't you done anything about it?
Well, what we have to take into account is that there can be many reasons for the difference in pay. For example, even in the situation of more jobs for women, women tend to go for part-time work or less well-paid work.
Yes, so what you're saying is that it's right that typically female occupations, such as a carer or a nurse, are paid at a lower level than, say, an equivalent male-dominated job?
No, not at all. What I am saying is that we have to look at the employment figures overall, and particularly we need to take into account our priorities of providing more employment for everyone in this difficult economic situation.
Excuse me for interrupting, but figures show that even in the same jobs, women tend to earn, on average, 15% less than men. For example, when they're CEOs of companies.
Those figures...
The opposition is calling for radical changes to be made to regulations affecting pay in both the public and private sphere.
The opposition would say that. But one might question just how far the government should go in dictating policy and enforcing regulations in the private sector.
Minister, with all due respect, we're talking about a 15% pay differential for the same job. How can that possibly be acceptable?
Well, it plainly isn't acceptable, and I'm glad you've brought that up, because there's another point that needs addressing, which is that research shows that men tend to be more assertive in asking for pay rises. And this is something we need to educate employers in, so that
Forgive me for interrupting, but I'm sure our listeners want to know the answer to one simple question. What are you going to do about the problem?
Before I answer that, let me just add to what I was saying. I think your listeners would agree that the situation has changed since the election, and the main focus at the moment should be on providing employment for everyone, and that's what we're doing as a government.
I don't wish to be blunt, but you haven't actually answered my question. Are you going to do anything about the gender pay gap? Yes or no?
Well, what we plan to do is to set up a review to look into the issue and to investigate possible ways forward. We are currently allocating more resources to studying and addressing the issue.
That could take another year or two.
All I'm saying is that the government admits there is a problem. The review will be thorough and wide-ranging, and we will take its findings very seriously.
Thank you, Minister.
Unit 3, Recording 6. 1.
This figure has been taken out of context.
2.
Let me put it in perspective.
3.
What we're seeing is actually a positive, in that more women are in work than ever before.
4.
Well, what we have to take into account is that there can be many reasons for the difference in pay.
5.
I'm glad you've brought that up, because there's another point that needs addressing.
6.
Before I answer that, let me just add to what I was saying.
7.
Well, what we plan to do is to set up a review to look into the issue.
8.
All I'm saying is that the government admits there is a problem.
Unit 3, Recording 7. 1.
What we'd like to do is to allocate more resources to sport.
2.
What the council will always do is stand up for the rights of the self-employed.
3.
What the council should be discussing is a budget for parks.
Unit 3, Recording 8. 1.
But surely that's not the point.
2.
Yes, so what you're saying is that...
3.
Excuse me for interrupting, but
4.
with all due respect,
5.
forgive me for interrupting, but
6.
I don't wish to be blunt, but
Unit 3, Recording 9.
People, and as a career consultant, that is definitely the most common question I get from clients, and the most relevant.
OK, so how do we future-proof our career choices? How can we be certain that the career path we choose won't peter out somewhere down the road?
Well, in many cases, we can use common sense to work out likely scenarios.
Could you explain what you mean?
Well, we can take a handful of jobs and look at where they might go in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of automation. Let's pick from different fields, just for the sake of illustration. So let's say musician, financial advisor.
Can I throw in a couple, like a tour guide?
And one more?
Chef.
All right. So musician, financial advisor, tour guide, chef. Who is going to find themselves out of a job in 10 years, or at least struggling because of the way automation has taken over their tasks? So to start with, it's old news, really, that factory jobs have mostly been replaced by robots.
But none of these are factory jobs.
No, but what I was getting at is that if you look at the jobs that have a repetitive component, for example, some sort of manual activity that could, in theory, be done by a machine, these seem to be the most vulnerable to automation.
Oh, you mean like musician?
Yes, interestingly, that would be one. A big part of a musician's job is actually repetitious. A lot of what a musician does has long ago been automated, like with synthesizers.
So it's the mechanical, repetitive element that's most vulnerable. Manual labour, essentially.
One might think so, but in fact, it's not just manual activity at all. Financial analysis has long been done by computers.
So financial advisors are doomed. I've heard of those robo-advisors. They're supposedly at least as good as humans.
Some people aren't comfortable with a robot making decisions about their money, but that career area has been impacted by automation, and I think we've only just seen the start of it. Computers will be able to make much better judgments than human beings.
Well then, financial advisor, not a good career choice.
I wouldn't say that, as someone has to write the programs and maintain them.
A financial wizard with programming skills.
That, for example, would be a strong combination of skills.
So your point is that, what do we call it then, as opposed to manual labour?
Intellectual work?
Yeah, so you mean intellectual work is as vulnerable to automation as manual work, maybe even more so.
There are a lot of variables, so I wouldn't go with a simple comparison like that. Look at the other two jobs on our list, tour guide and chef. I wouldn't call either of them intellectual or manual.
No. Well, with chef, it depends on the kind of chef, doesn't it? A lot of a chef's job is manual in any case. All that washing and chopping veggies.
Probably most kitchen staff in a restaurant do tasks that can be automated. It's a tough career unless you're a top chef or a celebrity chef. In reality, the genuinely creative jobs are reserved for the lucky few.
How about a tour guide?
Of course, there are free and low-cost computer tour guides, interactive maps, recorded guided tours, all that stuff, and that's taken away a lot of the jobs in the travel industry. But if you put cost aside, a good tour guide can bring something very personal to a visit to a new place.
That's true. When I have a tour guide, a good tour guide, I feel so much more in touch with a place. My visit stops being a virtual one.
Yes, what a human can bring to guiding a tour that a robot can't is that human touch. And that underlines a key point in future-proofing a career. Think in terms of the human element and bring that to whatever you do. Provided you've chosen a job where that's a premium, you're less likely to be bumped off by an app.
That's encouraging. Well, from our list, it seems like if any job is safest from automation, it's being a tour guide?
Being a good tour guide, yes. Compared to the other jobs we discussed. It's not highly lucrative, but you can live off it. And if you have language skills, you'll always be in demand.
And which of the four is the most vulnerable, do you think?
Well, it's hard to give a cut-and-dried answer to that, as there are other factors at play here.
Unit 4. Influence. Recording 1. 1.
Jennifer's biological parents didn't feel up to the task of raising a child with no legs.
2.
Jennifer held off on contacting Dominique for 4 years and then finally posted the letter.
3.
The sisters have to make up for more than 20 years of being separated.
4.
They meet once in a while to catch up on the latest news about each other's lives.
5.
Even if she stops gymnastics, Jennifer has her career as an inspirational speaker to fall back on.
Unit 4, Recording 2. 1.
Do you feel up to?
2.
Can you hold off on?
3.
I need to catch up on.
4.
Nothing makes up for.
5.
When I can't think of a new recipe, I often fall back on.
Unit 4, Recording 3.
As a teenager, my role model was lawyer Atticus Finch, the hero of To Kill a Mockingbird. I read it when I was about 13, and then I saw the old black and white film on TV with Gregory Peck. Finch was awesome because he confronts racists in his community by defending a black man. Despite coming up against resistance and threats, he is a man of principle and doesn't back out of the trial. I wanted to live up to his high ideals.
For young girls, a great role model is Merida in Brave, the Pixar animation. She's the one with the red corkscrew hair. Anyway, she wants to get out of a marriage arranged by her mother, so she comes up with a plan to change her mother's mind. She's the absolute antithesis of the traditional fairy tale princess, and my daughter, who is 10, really looks up to her for doing what she felt was right for her.
For me, Holden Caulfield, the main character of Catcher in the Rye, was an important role model when I was in my teens and well into my 20s. Holden is a student at a private school who finds it so difficult to cope with the pressures of the real world that he runs off to New York City and gets caught up in some scary situations with strange people. I identified with his feelings of alienation and the rejection he experienced time and time again. His adolescent suffering somehow helped me face up to my own issues.
Unit 4, Recording 4.
Most of us are now only communicating with those within our own social media bubble. So what impact is this having on us? Philosopher Julian Bagini.
We know from lots and lots of research in psychology, we have a tendency anyway to seek out views which reinforce our own, and we have a tendency to discount evidence which contradicts us. So we're up against that bias, whatever happens. Now, if in addition to that, we're actually being fed more of the stuff that supports our view, and we're having views that contradict us hidden from us in some way, that just magnifies the effect even more. And so the dangers, I think, are clear. You know, if you end up only exposing yourself to a narrow range of views, then first of all, you are not exercising your critical thinking faculties. And secondly, contrary views are going to seem not just wrong, but they're going to end up seeming bizarrely wrong in the end, because you won't even understand how anyone even begins to think something different to yourself.
I like Julian's idea that things outside your bubble don't just look wrong, but might start to look weirdly wrong. It's something we'll come back to later on, but it starts closer to home than you might think. It's time to talk about your friends again. You know, the ones you talk to on social media. It's really satisfying to do this, and it's what I love doing, but you're not actually talking to all of your friends.
You think that you're, keeping up with all of your friends, when in fact it's only a sort of small subset, and perhaps even, not even a subset. It can be quite shocking, really. The average person, the consumer on the street, has very, very little idea. Perhaps slightly increasing, there's an increasing awareness perhaps, but the vast majority of sort of Facebook users have no idea that they're seeing an algorithmically filtered feed.
So the algorithm kicks in, and that's what's choosing what I get to see or don't see.
When Facebook first launched, it was effectively a chronological feed of everything, and you could keep up with all your friends' comings and goings and, new births and birthdays and so on. But things have shifted over the years, but the education has not been there to sort of tell people how it's changed. So the whole usage of the site has evolved without them really knowing it. The owner should be on the social networks to sort of better inform their users about how these sites function.
So just to be clear, not only have I created a bubble around myself by selecting my friends, I'm only interacting with a handful of them, only getting to see their news on my timeline. But social media isn't the only place where I'm in a bubble. Think about everything else that you use the internet for. The searching, the shopping, the information gathering. Bubbles exist there too.
For a lot of us, we assume that, if we Google Barack Obama, that the result that's going to come up at the top is kind of the most authoritative result on Barack Obama. And that's just not always the case anymore.
I had no idea about this bubble that Eli Paris had told me about.
So I asked a bunch of friends to Google the same thing at the same time and send me screenshots of what they found. And when I saw those screenshots side by side and saw that different people were really getting very different results, that's when it really sunk in for me.
And this is what really freaks me out. Every time I use search engines, some of the information is actually hidden from me. The algorithm is deciding what's best for me.
Unit 4, Recording 5. 1.
If you end up only exposing yourself to a narrow range of views, then first of all, you are not exercising your critical thinking faculties. Secondly, contrary views are going to seem not just wrong, but they're going to end up seeming bizarrely wrong in the end, because you won't even understand how.
2.
So I asked a bunch of friends to Google the same thing at the same time and send me screenshots of what they found. And when I saw those screenshots side by side and saw that different people were really getting very different results, that's when it really...
3.
Think about everything else that you use the internet for. The searching, the shopping, the information gathering. Bubbles exist there too.
4.
Perhaps slightly increasing, there's an increasing awareness perhaps, but the vast majority of sort of Facebook users have no idea that they're seeing an algorithmically filtered feed.
5.
We know from lots and lots of research in psychology, we have a tendency anyway to seek out views which reinforce our own, and we have a tendency to discount evidence which contradicts us.
6.
When Facebook first launched, it was effectively a chronological feed of everything, and you could keep up with all your friends' comings and goings and, new births and birthdays and so on.
Unit 4, Recording 6. 1.
There could come a time when...
2.
I'd like there to be more...
3.
There seem to be a lot of problems with...
4.
There isn't any point in complaining about...
5.
Is there anyone who doesn't have...
Unit 4, Recording 7. A.
Succinct.
B.
Persuasive.
C.
Credible.
D.
Genuine.
E.
Pertinent.
F.
Earnest.
G.
Compelling.
H.
Pushy.
Unit 4, Recording 8.
I'd like to tell you about escape rooms, which have become one of my favourite free time activities and which I think some of you might really enjoy. They're everywhere now, and big cities have literally dozens of them. So what are they? Well, escape rooms are basically these small rooms or floors, usually in rundown or abandoned buildings, and each escape room complex has different rooms with different themes. What you have to do in each one is the same. You go into the room with 4 or 5 other people, so you go in with friends, so it's a good social experience. You're locked in the room for 60 minutes, and your task is to find a way out of the room. And to do this, you have to engage in lots of puzzle solving, collaborative puzzle solving, so you do it together. The rooms are elaborate. It's like this huge 3D puzzle, and each room is a different theme. To give you an example, let's say the theme is Ancient Egypt. The room is the office of a professor of Ancient Egypt, and you're surrounded by locked cupboards. All you have is one key hanging down, and there are padlocks everywhere, so you have to find the right lock for the key. Eventually you find it, you open the cupboard, and there you find another key, or a piece of paper with numbers on it, or a paper trail of clues that needs some lateral thinking. You've got to communicate a lot with the others, like, "Why do you think we got this piece of paper?" or "What's this number?" "Hey, this number's the same as that number over there. Do you think there's something in that?" All the while you can see that the clock's ticking, and it gets a bit frantic. But you can't panic, you can't get out, and you can't stop working as a team. If you succeed, it's great. You did it as a team, and you feel really good about it. If you fail, well, that's a shame. But you did it as a team, and you feel really good about it. In other words, either way, it's the feeling of teamwork that you take away, and you go for a drink together and talk about it for hours. So that's how an escape room works. And who does it suit? Well, it suits people who like doing hands-on work, people who like looking around and taking it all in, trying to connect the dots, and most of all, it suits people who like working in a team. If that's not you, then perhaps escape rooms aren't for you. You have to enjoy the team element, and finding your role in that, whether your role is the foot soldier or the general. The thing is, it's cooperative, it's collaborative, it's not competitive. In short, escape rooms are certainly worth trying once. Not only will you have a unique, exciting experience, but you will also share an experience with friends that you'll be talking about for years. I guarantee it.
Unit 4, Recording 9. 1.
It's like this huge 3D puzzle.
2.
You've got to communicate a lot with the others, like, "Why do you think we got this piece of paper?"
3.
But you can't panic, you can't get out, and you can't stop working as a team.
4.
If you succeed, it's great. You did it as a team, and you feel really good about it. If you fail, well, that's a shame. But you did it as a team, and you feel really good about it.
5.
And who does it suit? Well, it suits people who like doing hands-on work, people who like looking around and taking it all in, trying to connect the dots, and most of all, it suits people who like working in a team.
6.
You have to enjoy the team element, and finding your role in that, whether your role is the foot soldier or the general.
7.
Not only will you have a unique, exciting experience, but you'll also share an experience with friends that you'll be talking about for years. I guarantee it.
Unit 4, Recording 10. 3.
But you can't panic, you can't get out, and you can't stop working as a team.
Unit 5, Body, Recording 1.
Long awaited. Long haul. Low maintenance. High powered. High profile. short-staffed, long-suffering, high-tech, short-tempered, long-winded.
Unit 5, Recording 2.
Now, it's one of those dreams that go through the heads of teenage girls. You're walking down the street with your mum. A talent scout stops you and says you're so beautiful you could be a successful model. That's exactly what happened to Victoire d'Auxerre on the streets of Paris. She became a leading model at the age of 17. She's now 24 and has written Size Zero, My Life as a Disappearing Model. Victoire, what happened that day when you were out with your mother?
Well, exactly what you said. Actually, I was literally walking in the street. I was preparing my A-level and I wanted to go to a famous uni in France. So I actually never dreamed of becoming a model. That's why maybe it worked for me, you know. And so I was in the streets of Le Marais in Paris, shopping with my mom. And a man came to me and said to me, "You have an incredible nose. It will take the light perfectly and you are going to become the next Claudia Schiffer."
So what was your experience with trying to stay slim enough to satisfy the demands of the industry?
Well, I have to say it was quite awful, actually, because I couldn't eat anything, because you have to be so skinny, you know, to fit into these clothes.
So what was your daily diet?
So I ate 3 apples a day. And I couldn't eat anything else, or I was going to gain weight. And that's why I fell into anorexia.
How did you manage to just function on 3 apples a day?
Well, you don't really, you know, I fainted all the time. I fell down in the street and my agent actually only gave me a piece of chicken. He didn't even give me sugar. What I did is that I had the little voice, you know, in my head, the voice of anorexia actually, which was the voice of my agent telling me, "You're going to gain weight, you won't fit into the clothes." And so when you are anorexic, then I tried to throw up and it didn't work, and I took laxatives, and then my body was used to it. So I took 2 pills and 4 and 5. Then I had to go to the hospital.
How did you get well again?
So I spent 3 months at the hospital and doctors saved my life, you know, because my body was so damaged. I actually had the skeleton of a 70-years-old woman when I was 19. I had lost my hair and all that, so I had to take many pills to build all this up again.
In France, there are rules about not having women or girls who are too thin. How well does that work in France?
It doesn't work. So the law is not applied, actually. I helped the deputy who wrote the law. That's why I wrote my book. It all came from this law. It's not applied at all. I had a meeting with the Minister of Health and Women's Rights, and she literally told me that she had a meeting with all the designers, and they told her, if you do apply this law, we won't do the Fashion Week in Paris anymore. So it's all about money and nothing about health, because the fashion industry has so much power.
Victoire d'Auxerre, thank you very much indeed for being with us this morning.
Unit 5, Recording 3. 1.
And so I was in the streets of Le Marais in Paris, shopping with my mom, and a man came to me and said to me, "You have an incredible nose, it will take the light perfectly and you are going to become the next Claudia Schiffer."
2.
Well, I have to say it was quite awful, actually, because I couldn't eat anything, because you have to be so skinny, you know, to fit into these clothes.
3.
So I ate 3 apples a day, and I couldn't eat anything else, or I was going to gain weight, and that's why I fell into anorexia.
4.
Well, you don't really, you know, I fainted all the time. I fell down in the street and my agent actually only gave me a piece of chicken. He didn't even give me sugar.
5.
And so when you are anorexic, then I tried to like throw up and it didn't work, and I took laxatives, and then my body was used to it. So I took 2 pills and 4 and 5. Then I had to go to the hospital.
6.
I actually had the skeleton of a 70-years-old woman when I was 19. I had lost my hair and all that, so I had to take like many pills to build all this up again.
Unit 5, Recording 4. 1.
Some things I'll never understand.
2.
Your phone. Would you mind lending it to me just for tonight?
3.
He's just come in, that friend of yours.
4.
That book I lent you, have you finished it?
5.
Why he married her, I really don't know.
6.
Why is he here?
That I couldn't tell you.
7.
I don't think it's the right job for you, working as a model.
8.
That actor, I can't remember his name, but he was in Thor.
Unit 5, Recording 5. 1.
It's ridiculous. The idea that they can make rules about what you can and can't wear. The big companies, I mean.
2.
The need for a neat and tidy appearance, I agree with that. But, for example, to fire a woman for refusing to wear high heels, that's outrageous.
3.
They're bad for your feet, high-heeled shoes. It's been proven, so it must be illegal firing someone for that.
4.
And those 2 girls who were barred from boarding their flight because they were wearing leggings, they really should sue the airline. At least that's what I think.
5.
And there's also that case, some interns in a company in the States, they wrote a petition protesting that it was too strict, the dress code I mean, and guess what? They got fired.
Unit 5, Recording 6. 1.
It's not a panacea.
2.
I don't like to exert myself physically.
3.
But there's one thing I can always get engrossed in.
4.
So it's important that I can incorporate it into my daily routine.
5.
I'm simply out of sync with myself.
6.
There is no magic bullet.
7.
I have a way of restoring my peace of mind.
8.
It's a general cure-all.
Unit 5, Recording 7.
What I've found really works for health, for me, man of a certain age, putting on a few pounds and stuff, is the 5-2 diet. I don't know if you've tried it, but basically the idea is you fast for 2 days. You eat normally perfectly, whatever you want to eat for the rest of the week, the 5 days. And then on those 2 days, you just limit what you're eating to 500 calories.
I find that I wasn't very good at dieting and things like that, and I started doing Bikram yoga. I don't know if you've ever tried that.
Bikram, no, I don't know.
So basically, it's yoga, but it's much more intense. It's set in a heated room, a carpeted room, that's 39 degrees, and it's just 26 positions. But every time you go to the class, it's the same 26 positions.
Oh my.
But you burn 1,000 calories a class, and you sweat so much, and they say you can't drink water for this first 25 minutes. But you come out of that room feeling amazing. But
that reminds me of, so I've joined a choir, and I think that is really, really good for your health, actually. I'm not that into dieting, not that much into exercise, but it's the same thing. When I come out of the room, I just feel completely lifted.
Well, I feel
really
the same way about
happy.
Bikram yoga, because it's just something that you can go, you don't have to think about it. There's an instructor there. You meet people, but you don't talk throughout the class. So it's something that you can just do yourself. And it's not, of course you exert energy while doing it.
Yeah. But to get back to, I mean, like with the 5-2, the advantage of something like that is it's not actually something extra in your, I mean, like for me, my day is busy. And if I had an extra thing like singing to go to or had to go to a class, I don't know if I've got time for that.
Going back to the choir thing, I think I like it because it is a part of my day that isn't work or isn't a commute or anything like that. I can just go and be in this room. I meet people. It's a really joyful experience.
But it's funny you should mention that, actually, because I feel the same way about Bikram yoga, about not being able to fit it in, you don't have to fit it into your day. I actually enjoy that because, I'll be at work all day. It's a really stressful environment, living in the city and things like that. And actually taking that hour and a half to go a form of meditation and breathing and relaxation just really, centres myself. And
actually, that's like with singing. It's really good it's really good physically. Because you're talking about your whole body. So it's not just for happiness, it's physically. Actually, it's really good for your complete self. It's a bit like exercise.
Yeah. Well, but going back to the 5-2, apart from the weight loss, it does have proven, and they've done tests who've proven benefits in terms of, your insulin levels, your heart condition. So it benefits you, in all sorts of other ways.
As I was saying, that's exactly the same as singing. They've proven that it's really good for your whole body, your whole self, physically, mentally.
Have they?
For mental health, it is absolutely, because if you can regulate your breathing, you can control panic, you can do all kinds of things.
Anyway, I just want to add about the Bikram yoga is that it's not just about going to a yoga class, and it's a form of...
To get back to what I was saying before, that's the same as with the choir. You learn songs that you can then take home. You can practice at home, but then you've also got this lovely community, and you can come together.
That reminds me of going to Bikram yoga. It's that community. You tend to be at the same classes. I mean, we've all got a strong point to offer, but I do think Bikram yoga is the way forward.
Well, for you.
Unit 5, Recording 8. 1.
Same thing. When I come out of the room, I just feel completely lifted.
Well, I feel
really
the same way about
happy.
Bikram yoga, because it's just something that you can go, you don't have to...
2.
To go a form of meditation and breathing and relaxation just really, centres myself. And
actually, that's like with singing. It's really good it's really good physically, because you're talking.
Unit 5, Recording 9. 1.
What I've found really works for health, for me, man of a certain age.
2.
Putting on a few pounds and stuff, is the 5-2 diet. I don't know if you've tried it, but basically the idea is...
3.
With the 5-2, the advantage of something like that is it's not actually something extra in your... I mean, like for me.
4.
Going back to the 5-2, apart from the weight loss, it does have proven, and they've done tests who've proven benefits in terms of, your insulin levels, your heart condition. So it benefits.
5.
About the Bikram yoga is that it's not just about going to a yoga class.
6.
I mean, we've all got a strong point to offer, but I do think Bikram yoga is the way forward.
Well, for you.
Unit 5, Recording 10.
A food memory. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is this dish my mom used to make on special occasions, a dish called coquille Saint-Jacques, which is a French dish, I guess, made from scallops and white wine and a few other ingredients. I can just taste it now. I remember when I was very young and I didn't like seafood, this was the one kind of seafood I loved, which is ironic, really, since the scallops are cooked in white wine. Anyway, it's pretty simple. Just some scallops. My mom used the big white sea scallops. And she'd make this amazing sauce. Onions and mushrooms and butter and cream, I think, and the wine, and cooked it all together. It's ages since I've made it, actually, so I'm just trying to remember. Oh, it's coming back to me now, how it tasted. But what really made it was the presentation. She served it in these big scallop shells, and there's mashed potatoes around the edge, and the scallops in the middle, then cheese and breadcrumbs, I think, on top. Then it's baked in the oven. My mouth waters just thinking about it. Imagine this dish served in these big scallop shells. It's incredibly succulent, decadently rich, really. When I used to smell this cooking, I knew it was a special occasion, like someone coming for dinner. And whenever my mom asks what I want for my birthday dinner, it's coquille Saint-Jacques. I'll always associate this dish with home and special occasions and family. I've sometimes tried making it, but it never comes out the same.
Unit 6. Cultures. Recording 1.
Hectic. No go. Out of place. Congested. Sanctuary. On my doorstep. Alienating. Hustle and bustle. Intimidating.
Unit 6. Recording 2.
Part and parcel. Sooner or later. First and foremost. Slowly but surely. Safe and sound. More or less. Tit for tat. All in all. Make or break. Wine and dine.
Unit 6. Recording 3.
Simultaneous interpreting is something that's always fascinated me. What is it like to sit in a booth all day at the United Nations or in a conference translating at the same time as people are talking? What sort of problems do the interpreters face? Joining me in the studio is Alan Danes, who is an interpreter for international conferences where he translates between Spanish, German and English. Alan, welcome to the programme.
Thanks.
So, what would you say are the main challenges you face when you're interpreting?
That's a question I get asked a lot. There are quite a few challenges. Some might surprise you. For example, you know how people tap their microphone? You know, testing. Well, in conferences nowadays, the sound levels have been carefully checked and are set for voice level. So if a speaker taps his microphone or shouts into it, it can cause serious injury to the interpreter. At the very least, it's extremely painful.
I'd never even considered that. Of course, you're sitting there in your booth with your earphones on, very vulnerable. So what can you do?
Well, it's crucial to educate the speaker and, of course, the organisation. I kind of shock them, tell them that their behaviour can incapacitate the interpreter, and in the worst-case scenario, there's a risk of actual hearing loss of the interpreter, actually going deaf.
Are you serious?
Yes.
So what other things can the speaker do wrong?
One of the worst is when they insist on speaking a language they're incompetent in, and they're really not good at. I remember one very high-powered professor from, well, I won't say the country, but her English was impossible to follow. I just had to make an educated guess as to what she was trying to say. Normally, in that kind of situation, I'd ask the speaker to give me the speech in advance so I could translate from the written word.
And I suppose sometimes people speak too fast for you to follow.
Yes, to a certain extent, but from experience, I've found there's no point in asking them to slow down. Everyone has a natural pace of speaking, so the best thing to do is not try to translate word for word, but to summarise what they're saying.
Right, I can understand that.
And then, of course, there are cultural differences. Humour is an interpreter's nightmare. There's a risk of humorous sayings from one language getting completely lost in translation. Humour doesn't travel well, and jokes are often just not funny.
So what do you do if a speaker is telling a lot of jokes?
I'll try and see if I can find an equivalent in the audience's language, but if I can't think fast enough, I'll fall back on the old interpreter's rule of saying the speaker has just made an untranslatable joke. It's about such and such, please laugh. That seems to work. Now, one really problematic area is when the speaker uses lots of metaphors or cultural references. For example, if a US speaker starts using metaphors from American baseball, something like, I'll take a rain check on that. Now, most audiences won't have a clue about this, so I have to translate it as something like, he would like to accept your invitation at a later time. You have to be very quick thinking and versatile. You also have to have a broad knowledge of culturally specific things.
Is there anything else you can do about that?
Again, I try to educate the speaker. I suggest that they should steer clear of cultural references which seem familiar to them but may not be understood in a different context. Instead, they should find references to people or places or events that the audience will understand. But of course, often I only meet the speaker on the day of the conference, so I don't always have a chance to help them prepare for the process.
That sounds like a lot of problems.
Yes, but most problems are fixable as long as there's mutual respect between us, between the speaker and the interpreter, understanding that we both have an important job to do. Oh, and there's one more I really must mention. It's a problem I take home with me. You see, I get so used to thinking ahead and predicting what people are going to say that I tend to do the same at home. I anticipate the end of a sentence, so my wife is always complaining, "You never let me finish."
Well, this has been a real insight. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Unit 6, Recording 4.
Call for. Allege. Acknowledge. Reprimand. Repudiate. Maintain. Illustrate. Voice. Vow. Relate. Plead. Echo.
Unit 6, Recording 5.
That's interesting. But what made you choose this line of work in the first place?
Well, I always had strong feelings about equal opportunity, that everyone should have the same access to information and official processes. My mother is deaf, and I saw how she was often left out of things. For example, the parent-teacher meetings when I was at school.
Is that how you learnt to sign?
Yes, I grew up signing. It was natural to me, so I had no problem with fluency or with switching between speech and signing.
I see. And what are the ups and downs of the job?
Oh, there are plenty of positives. I've helped people understand their doctor's instructions about taking medication so they could do so confidently and independently. The other day I interpreted at a job interview for quite a high-up position. The candidate, who was deaf of course, prepared a fantastic presentation, and my translation helped them get the job. I've also done signing for birds.
That's incredible. It's just never occurred to me how useful it must be to know sign language.
Oh yes, like knowing any language.
So what's the downside of the job?
Well, there are some tough situations I've handled. For example, translating for terminally ill kids or divorce cases. These really drain me.
Is it the signing?
No, it's the human emotion. And maybe being the mediator and the way signing is so physical, maybe I internalise some things I shouldn't.
Otherwise, it sounds like a great job.
It is. Oh, except the travel. It sounds glamorous when I get these jobs abroad, but I prefer to sleep in my own bed.
Well, thank you for talking with us.
Unit 6, Recording 6. 1.
So it was when I was in Egypt, and I think it was the first or second session I had with the group.
What were you doing out there again?
Oh, just some training with staff at a bank there. Same bank I work for here.
The bank,
Anyway, there was this one woman, And she was quite quiet, so I just went up to her at the beginning of the lesson. I was trying to make small talk. Yeah. So I complimented her on her jewellery. I said, "Oh, I really like your bracelet and your earrings."
Were they really nice?
Awful. These big ring earrings and a bulky bracelet.
Oh.
Anyway, she was happy and I forgot about it until the last day of the course when she came up to me with her hands clasped and she said, "I want you to have these." And she opened it and it was these horrible great big earrings and bracelet that I talked about.
Oh no.
I felt really guilty because they were her favourites and I'd got them and I didn't want them.
How awkward.
A couple of days later, I was telling a friend of mine about this, an Egyptian friend of mine, and she said that basically, in Egyptian culture, if you tell somebody you like something, the norm is to give it to you.
Really? I've heard that, but it sounds like a stereotype.
Well, it was an Egyptian friend who told me.
Do you really think it's always the case? I mean, is it something most people would do?
I don't know. Good question. Anyway, I was really careful about giving people compliments on their possessions after that. But, it's difficult. You go to someone's house and it's natural.
It's natural, yeah.
I'm accustomed to saying something positive. You say, "What a lovely vase." Yeah. And just as the words slip out, you realise you may be obliging them to give it to you. And it feels awkward.
Awkward, yeah. I don't think I could get used to that. But I still wonder if it's really that common. I mean, if they offer you...
2.
So was there anything there that made it hard to get used to?
In Japan? Well, it's funny. I found so many things completely alien, but I never felt out of place. I felt really at home.
That's good.
But still, I can remember a lot of times when I got it wrong. I just didn't pick up on the signals or I didn't know what I was supposed to do.
Like when?
For example, I was teaching a company class at a car manufacturer. A group of 8 or 9 engineers, nice guys. We sat at desks in a rectangular shape, me on one side, sort of alone.
Right.
And at the end of the first lesson, I said, "Thank you to everyone, see you next time." And then I started jotting down notes about the lesson, as I always did. Then I noticed they were all still sitting there. So I said, "Thank you again. The lesson is finished." They didn't budge.
Oh.
So I quickly finished my notes. I felt really awkward and mystified. And finally I stood up to put my things in my bag, and the second I stood up, all 8 guys jumped up, grabbed their stuff and zipped out the door.
What was that about?
Just shows my ignorance, of course. I'm used to students leaving before me. It's commonplace in Australia, but one of the guys explained to me later that it would have been rude for them to stand up first no matter what. It's a given that they defer to the teacher. They wait for the teacher to lead.
Defer to the teacher, right. Is that a general Japanese thing? I mean, is it really generally part of the culture?
You mean, is it a stereotype? Well, I think...
Somehow I doubt it's generally true.
I don't know. It was my general impression there was this dynamic between students and teacher.
But you think it depends on the situation?
I suppose so. I'm really not sure.
I always wonder about these things.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I felt bad. I mean, poor them. I think they all missed their bus home. I felt really foolish.
Unit 6, Recording 7.
The norm is to stand up when the teacher arrives.
I'm accustomed to taking my shoes off for class.
I got used to cleaning the classroom after the lesson.
Singing a college song is completely alien to me.
I'm used to wearing a uniform.
It's a given that everyone arrives early or on time.
Unit 6, Recording 8.
If you tell somebody you like something, the norm is to give it to you.
Really? I've heard that, but it sounds like a stereotype.
Well, it was an Egyptian friend who told me.
Do you really think it's always the case? I mean, is it something most people would do?
You may be obliging them to give it to you. And it feels awkward.
Awkward, yeah. I don't think I could get used to that. But I still wonder if it's really that common.
You mean, is it a stereotype? Well, I think...
Somehow I doubt it's generally true.
I don't know. It was my general impression there was this dynamic between students and teacher.
But you think it depends on the situation?
I suppose so. I'm really not sure.
I always wonder about these things.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I feel bad.
Unit 6, Recording 9. 1.
I've heard that, but it sounds like a stereotype.
2.
Do you really think it's always the case?
3.
I still wonder if it's really that common.
4.
Somehow I doubt it's generally true.
5.
Don't you think it depends on the situation?
6.
I always wonder about these things.
Unit 7, Classics, Recording 1.
A-lister. Chick flick. Female protagonist. Flashback. Formulaic plotline. Heist movie. Indie film. Plot twist. Road movie. Spaghetti western. Supporting cast. Universal appeal.
Unit 7, Recording 2.
On the positive side, this review gives a clear sense of what this film is like and why you'd recommend it, so the message comes across clearly. I like the bit of background information about Jarmusch, since readers might not know him. That's a good bit of content. Your language is rich, some beautiful expressions, so most of it's actually a pleasure to read. In terms of things you need to change, the main thing is that it's just too long in places and you've packed too much into each paragraph, all except the last. I found that as good as the writing is, there's too much detail in places, and you need to cut that back. Now, to do this, I don't suggest fiddling and cutting words here and there. You risk losing coherence. You can achieve more and with less work by cutting a whole sentence from each paragraph. The way I suggest doing this is, let's see, here in the first paragraph, you start out with this scene setting about indie films, and that's all that sentence does. It sets the scene. You could just cut this first long sentence and start from here. We'll cut meanwhile and start with relatively few. Now, in each of the second and third paragraphs, there's a sentence you can cut, for example.
Unit 7, Recording 3.
He wishes for the cloths of heaven. Had I the heavens' embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light, I would spread the cloths under your feet. But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams.
You and I explain quietly. You hear me shouting. You try a new tack. I feel old wounds reopen. You see both sides. I see your blinkers. I am placatory. You sense a new selfishness. I am a dove. You recognise the hawk. You offer an olive branch. I feel the thorns. You bleed. I see crocodile tears. I withdraw. You reel from the impact.
Unit 7, Recording 4.
Oh, I love this poem. Unsurprisingly, it's a classic and often features in people's top 10 poems. It's written by Yeats, one of the greatest poets of the English language, although he himself was Irish. It's such a rich poem, rich in imagery. That's one thing I love about it. The writer is trying to express the depth of his love for a woman. So he compares his love to the sky, the universe, and the stars. And he pictures it as a beautifully made and embroidered cloth. I suppose that makes me think of someone helping another person by spreading a cloth under their feet, but his cloth is the whole night sky with the stars. It's a dark, deep, vast thing. There's no compromise, it's absolute. But then the poet contrasts this with what he can really offer her. Had I, he means, if I had such a precious thing, but of course he doesn't. He has no wealth to share with her, so all he can share with her are his hopes and dreams, and he places them under her feet. It's an act of immense, well, I suppose trust is the word. Yes, incredible trust. I think we can all relate to that. It's a universal theme. We're all painfully aware of how easy it is for a loved one to hurt us. She could walk all over his dreams, she could hurt him terribly, so he begs her to tread lightly, to treat his dreams with care. Those last lines really resonate with me. Sad to say, Yeats himself was deeply in love with a woman who did not return his love. And I love the way the poem is written, the elegance of the language, especially the opening lines, "Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, and wrought with golden and silver light." For me, it's the richness of language which is deeply evocative. It's amazing how words can paint such a beautiful picture, and if you examine it closely, you see it's impossible to read it fast, because of all those slow words with their slow stress and no rhymes, but the repetition, cloths, light, feet, dreams, tread. It moves me deeply every time I hear it.
This is one of my favourite poems, and I first read it when I was fairly young, about 15. I suppose it's not exactly a classic poem, but I think it's a modern classic. It's written by Roger McGough. He was one of the Liverpool poets and started about the same time as the Beatles in Liverpool. Anyway, when I first read the poem, I just instantly loved it. It just so clearly and sweetly describes how there can be a breakdown in communication between people in a loving relationship. That, for example, a quiet explanation is perceived as shouting. There's no sense that they can ever meet halfway. Probably because it is a loving relationship and because such important emotional investment has been made, we react so differently than when we're in a relationship with, say, just a friend. So much is at stake, I guess, and we have such high hopes that the smallest hint of a criticism can put a terrible strain on the relationship and seem utterly devastating. I love the way it's described as if from the outside. He's not blaming her, he's acting as an observer of their behaviour. We never really have such clear insights into the situation when we're in it. If only we could have that clarity about ourselves and what's actually happening. I love the directness. I love the contrast between what one person thinks they're doing and the very different way this is perceived by the other. But I like the way it's described directly. Just the actions are described as seen by each person, with no interpretation. It's quite simple language, really, lots of conversational phrases, and I think the simple title is quite perfect too, and also the way each line ends with either you or I. I like the lightness of touch and almost humour. No, that's not the right word. Showing the contrast, more like a paradox, really, being aware of our foolishness but unable to act differently. I guess I like the way there's no attempt to suggest a solution, and that's entirely right. This is just how things are. Although I do think that reading this poem is a little bit of enlightenment in itself. As much as we can hope for, I did feel and still do feel a kind of gratitude for this poem.
Unit 7, Recording 5. 1.
I think poetry and song have very little in common.
I agree. They're fundamentally different.
2.
I won't be going to the Dylan concert. It costs too much.
Yes, it's prohibitively expensive.
3.
Your brother must be upset about missing the festival.
Yes, he's bitterly disappointed.
4.
You look wet. So your tent isn't all that good.
No, it's hopelessly inadequate.
5.
The speakers at the slam poetry session were mostly women then.
Yes, they were predominantly female.
6.
Pablo Neruda is a highly respected poet around the world.
Yes, he's greatly admired.
7.
It's essential that all kids have the opportunity to play a musical instrument.
I agree. It's vitally important.
8.
Students should choose if they want to learn a poem by heart and not be forced to do so.
I agree. That's infinitely preferable.
Unit 7, Recording 6.
The Trans-Siberian Railway is definitely one of those classic journeys that every traveller dreams of taking. I finally got the chance to do so a few years back. Some friends who had done it were like, yeah, it's amazing, but it's actually quite tedious. A whole week of looking out of the window, staring at birch trees going by. So I wasn't sure about it before I started, but in fact, it turned out to be really fun. I went on the most basic version of the train, no luxuries. So before I left Beijing, I stocked up on supplies, just instant noodles and jasmine tea. I knew I'd be able to get hot water on the train, but I'd heard that the dining car wasn't always reliable, especially when we crossed Siberia. Anyway, I was in a 4-bed sleeping compartment, and I remember that when we left Beijing, the other 3 fellow travellers, let's see, there were 2 young Chinese guys and this Russian guy. Really nice guy, and more on him in a minute. No one spoke any English. Fairly typical situation for a traveller in an exotic context, you know what I mean? You'd think it was awkward, the lack of a lingua franca, but to the contrary, it was really nice, sort of relaxed, like we're all in this together and let's just enjoy it. In fact, we did make many attempts at communicating, especially me and the Russian guy, by drawing pictures of things, maps showing where we were from, writing dates for major events in life, family tree and all that. Funny, I don't remember much about him now, but I remember understanding quite a lot about his family, his kids, his house, job, stuff like that. I also remember that he was a really warm-hearted guy and loved to share everything. For example, on the second day, I think it was, he pulled out a whole roast chicken, still warm, not sure where he got it, and simply split it into 4 pieces and gave each of us a piece, me and the 2 Chinese guys. Every day on the train was the same, really. Got up when I felt like it, went to the loo, made some tea and noodles, and stood at the window staring outside, waiting for the noodles to cool down. Once in a while, we'd stop in a station for a bit, and I usually got off to stretch my legs. I brought stuff with me, like chocolate and chewing gum. Some guy I met in Beijing told me it's a good idea to have stuff to give to kids or even sell. The first time we got off, and there was a bunch of kids around, yelling for gum and whatever, and I really felt awkward. I didn't want to just sprinkle the gum around and watch them wrestle for it. Then I spotted this kid on his own. He was standing by himself outside of the group, and I managed to make my way over to him, and then, when no one was looking, I gave him all the gum and chocolate I had. Stupid thing to do, maybe. But it was one of those moments when you realise you're so out of your element that you have to just let go of whatever scenario you've written in your head and go with an instinct. I wonder what he did with all that gum.
Unit 7, Recording 7. 1.
Some friends who had done it were like, yeah, it's amazing, but it's actually quite tedious.
2.
There were 2 young Chinese guys and this Russian guy. Really nice guy, and more on him in a minute.
3.
Fairly typical situation for a traveller in an exotic context, you know what I mean?
4.
It was really nice, sort of relaxed, like we're all in this together and let's just enjoy it.
5.
Funny, I don't remember much about him now, but I remember understanding quite a lot about his family, his kids, his house, job, stuff like that.
6.
For example, on the second day, I think it was, he pulled out a whole roast chicken, still warm.
7.
I brought stuff with me, like chocolate and chewing gum. Some guy I met in Beijing told me it's a good idea to have stuff to give to kids or even sell.
8.
Then I spotted this kid on his own.
9.
Stupid thing to do, maybe. But it was one of those moments when you realise you're so out of your element that you have to just let go.
Unit 7, Recording 8.
Got up when I felt like it, went to the loo, made some tea and noodles, and stood at the window staring outside. No one spoke any English. Fairly typical situation for a traveller in an exotic context.
Unit 7, Recording 9.
Ever been to Turkey?
Yes, several times. Brilliant beaches and fabulous old ruins.
Sounds great.
Thinking of going there?
Yeah, maybe next year.
Unit 7, Recording 10. Speaker 1.
I was on this flight to Argentina, a long-haul flight, and I'd just settled into my seat. I'd been working quite hard the few days before then, so I was quite tired. Anyway, there was this baby in the seat ahead of me, and it was crying. I went, uh-oh, and braced myself for a bad flight. Then the baby threw up all over its mum, and so I went forward to help. The airline staff gave the woman some clothes to change into, and I spent the remainder of the 18-hour journey helping out with the baby and getting to know the woman. You'd think I'd have been annoyed, but to the contrary. This was one of those times where you feel an event connects you with someone. It was as if I was in an altered state of mind, suddenly totally focused on this baby and her mother, totally alert, not thinking about things like a good night's sleep or whatever. The whole thing had an aura of destiny about it. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, her name was Martina Martinez, and she was Argentinian but married to a French guy. She went back to Argentina once a year to visit her folks. So that was fine, and she was able to help me out when we arrived at Buenos Aires airport and I needed some directions. We exchanged business cards and I thought nothing more of it. Anyway, it's a year later, and this time I'm flying to India for a holiday. And I hear two people talking, and I think that voice sounds familiar. And this guy calls the woman Martina. And there she was. This time 2 rows in front of me and with her husband and toddler. Different airline, different time of year, different destination. Talk about coincidences.
Speaker 2.
I was staying in this hotel in Scotland at some sort of conference. I can't remember exactly where it was, and I was at dinner and I realised that I didn't have my wallet. I'd had it before dinner, so I knew I hadn't had it outside of the hotel, and I reckoned it must be in my room. I went back there, but I just couldn't find it. I can tell you, I turned that room upside down. I looked through all the drawers, the wardrobe, everywhere. I was staying there with some colleagues, and I met one of them on my way down to reception to see if the wallet had been handed in. I was in a real panic as the wallet had all my cards in it, plus quite a bit of money. Anyway, his name was Rob, and he was like, "Give me 2 minutes in your room, and I guarantee I'll find it for you." I reckoned I had nothing to lose, so I said, "OK, go ahead." I went down to the TV room and began to watch the sport. It seemed like a minute later when he came into the room, brandishing my wallet. I was gobsmacked. I was like, "No, where did you find it?" And he said, "On top of the wardrobe." And then, of course, I remembered I'd put it there for safekeeping, right at the back of the wardrobe. When I checked, I only checked the front. Rob said it was easy. He does this sort of thing all the time, like he's got some sort of radar for objects or something, or perhaps more like a radar for human behaviour. You know, where would someone hide a wallet?
Unit 8. Choice. Recording 1. 1. A.
Articulate. Garrulous. Chatty.
B.
Determined. Headstrong. Resolute.
C.
Proud. Self-assured. Conceited.
2. A.
Intelligent. Smart. Well-dressed.
B.
Mean. Nasty. Stingy.
C.
Gifted. Excellent. Brilliant.
3. A.
Meticulous. Nitpicking. Systematic.
B.
Disabled. Special needs. Handicapped.
C.
Famous. Celebrated. Notorious.
Unit 8, Recording 2.
So, having studied all the research, Naomi, what do you think are the differences that you've been able to pinpoint between the actual experience of reading a print book and an e-book in terms of, let's say, concentration?
I did a lot of work surveying university students in 5 different countries around the world, more than 400 of them. And they all said very similar things about their experiences. I asked them, what is the one thing you like most about reading in print? What is the one thing you like most about reading electronically? And then what do you like least about those media? And you had an incredible number of 18 to 24-year-olds, the digital millennials, telling you they liked the smell of a book. I knew about 50 and 60-year-olds saying that. I did not know about young adults saying it. They talked about the tactile experience. They said it's real reading, which I found interesting, to read in print. For ebooks, what they liked most was it's very convenient. You can carry lots around without it weighing a lot. But when I asked, what is the medium on which you can best concentrate when you read? And they had the choice of print or an ebook or a tablet or a mobile phone or a laptop. 92% of all the subjects that I surveyed said, I concentrate best in print. Now, in a way, that's not surprising because the medium of print gives us the opportunity to concentrate, should we choose to. On the other hand, digital media are created more for skimming and scanning and scrolling. They're not designed for concentrated reading. And not surprisingly, that's what 18 to 24-year-olds are telling us is their experience.
How about comprehension between the two forms? Do readers take in what they read on an e-reader just as well as they take in printed matter?
It's a wonderful question on which we have conflicting research. Most of the research that's been done that gives a passage to read and then questions to ask afterwards shows that there is pretty much the same score that you will get whether you read that text on an e-reader of whatever sort on a computer screen or you read it in print. However, a really interesting study done in Israel, after doing that version of the study, said take as much or as little time as you want for reading the passages, and then we'll give you the comprehension test. Students who could take however much time they wanted spent less time with the digital version than they did with print, and did worse on the comprehension.
Is there a difference in emotional response?
That's a tricky question because it has been said that no one ever cried reading an ebook. Whether that's true or not remains to be seen, because I'd also have to ask how many people today will ever cry over a book. I've asked a number of my colleagues, and they say, I get emotional reading an ebook. And I say, okay, let's talk about it, or reading on my phone. And they say, I get involved. I said, what's the difference between getting involved in a plot, not wanting to be distracted, and really being emotionally drawn in, having the rest of the world go away, getting lost in the book? And they often step back and say, yeah, there's a little bit of a difference. If I hold that print book in my hand, I'm more emotionally connected because I'm physically connected. But again, we do not have good studies here, and I look forward to getting them because my hunch, I'm putting my money on not getting as involved in reading emotionally when we're reading on screen.
Unit 8, Recording 3. 1.
I'm not aware of any problems.
2.
There's some likelihood of rain.
3.
There are many reasons for learning English.
4.
I haven't got any regrets about the past.
5.
It's indicative of a new fashion.
Unit 8, Recording 4.
So what's your take on this article about the numbers of wolves in Europe increasing? I mean, it seems very worrying to me that that there's no control around this, that wolves just seem to be naturally increasing their numbers within, within tens or hundreds of kilometres of large urban populations.
Well, I feel like wolves just have a bad name, to be honest. You look at any film or a story depicting a wolf, it's never positive.
No, but there's a good reason for that, which is that they're dangerous wild animals, and they've got no place next to populations of humans. That's just asking for trouble, isn't it?
Well, maybe it's just me, but it feels like the danger is always exaggerated to me. Certainly in the media, they'll blow up any story. Even if one person has a really minor injury, suddenly all wolves are bad. I think it's time to get the balance back and give nature a chance to fight back. I don't think it's fair.
Well, I'm no expert, but I think it's important that the risk is properly assessed. And I think if you look at the statistics of human-wolf interaction, obviously wolves often come off worse because they end up being shot by hunters and the like. But
I'm really against any form of hunting. In fact, any form of culling them at all. I just don't think that's an answer. Is that what you're saying?
And would you feel the same if those populations of wolves were not in remote wildernesses, but were on the doorstep of large cities and potentially taking people's livestock, pets, children?
It's not a cut and dried question. I just don't think it's that simple. I don't think all of a sudden they're in the city, and they were always... I just don't think it's that simple.
I don't think there's evidence that they're in the city. The evidence is they're close to the cities, and therefore if you look at what's happened with foxes, for example, which were previously traditionally rural animals, we now talk about urban foxes. They're a part of our lives, but they can be dangerous. They do take people's pets. There are stories about them attacking children, and that's a fox. If you've got a wolf in the same sort of situation, I'm guessing that could cause you a real problem.
There are some things that I agree with, but I just think that tourists, for example, bring money to places, and it's actually a plus to have wolves because people are actually going to the country to see them. Did you ever think of it that way?
Yeah, in that respect, I'm with you. I think there's probably eco-tourist benefits that could come from having a population of wolves nearby, but they'd need to be controlled in some way or penned into a particular reserve.
No one would disagree with that. Obviously, you've got to have some sort of controls, but I just think we've taken it out of all proportion recently.
I'd be surprised if that was the case. I don't think we've got it out of proportion. I think that we need to ensure that if we want to live alongside animals like that, we need to take necessary precautions and potentially think about culling to keep the numbers within reason. Yeah. Do you not agree with me?
On the face of it, it seems like the only way to stop this problem is to kill animals. But actually, I think there are lots of other things you can do. I think that's really, really inhumane and too simple. It's not the right answer.
Unit 8, Recording 5.
What's your take on this? How do you see this? I'm really against any form of. Why should it be any different with? In that respect, I'm with you. No one would disagree with that. I'd be surprised if that's the case. That doesn't surprise me in the least. On the face of it, it seems... Well, supposedly so, but look at the facts.
Unit 8, Recording 6. 1.
Maybe it's just me, but it feels like the danger is always exaggerated.
2.
Well, I'm no expert, but I think it's important that the risk is properly assessed.
3.
If you've got a wolf in the same sort of situation, I'm guessing that could cause you a real problem.
4.
There are some things that I agree with, but I just think that tourists bring money to places and it's actually a plus to have wolves